Breaking news. Vladimir Putin has a plan to get even with Yevgeniy Prigozhin. According to CIA Director William Burns, Putin and Prigozhin's ceasefire is a ploy to buy time while the Russian leader plots his vengeance against the rebel leader. Putin is the ultimate apostle of payback in Burns's eyes, and he describes Putin as someone who believes in serving revenge cold. As a result, it's highly improbable that Prigozhin will avoid further punishment. The Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, echoes these concerns when he warns Prigozhin to watch what he eats and jokingly suggests he hire a food taster. Several Russian troops were killed in the recent uprising led by Prigozhin, but the Domestic Security Agency of Russia, the FSB, unexpectedly dropped the criminal investigation into the uprising without charging him or any other participants. This mercy stands in stark contrast to the harsher treatment of Russian journalists, protesters, and political opponents for similar transgressions in the past. Putin is rattled. Some observers of the Kremlin have speculated that high-ranking military officers backed Prigozhin's push to remove high-ranking defense officials because of his bold march and challenge to Russian leadership, which has shaken the government. Some have hypothesized that these officers took a cautious approach, waiting to see how the uprising would play out before acting. The leader of the Wagner mercenaries hoped for support from high-ranking military officers and thought he could rally backing from the ruling elite. Some military bloggers have claimed that authorities are looking into whether or not certain officers collaborated with Prigozhin during the uprising. Gen. Sergei Surovikin, who had close ties to Prigozhin, is said to have been detained, though it is unknown what charges he faces or where he is currently being held. There is an investigation into whether or not border guards or pilots were complicit in allowing Wagner's convoy to enter Russia from Ukraine. Putin is clearly very upset with his ex-friend. However, a czar cannot keep his position unless he is willing to do whatever it takes to silence a problem. On Friday, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that any aggression against Russia's neighbor and close ally Belarus would be considered an attack on Russia, and he accused Poland, a member of NATO, of having territorial ambitions in the former Soviet Union. In televised remarks to his Security Council, Putin warned that Moscow would respond forcefully to any aggression against Belarus, a country that forms a loose union state with Russia. After members of the Russian Wagner mercenary force arrived in Belarus, the Security Committee in Warsaw decided on Wednesday to relocate military units to eastern Poland. The secretary of the committee was quoted as saying by the state-run news agency PAP on Friday. Poland insists it has no plans to expand into neighboring Belarus. Putin had also said that Russia would remind the Poles that the western part of Poland was a gift from Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki of Poland made reference to this on Twitter on Friday night, writing, "Stalin was a war criminal, guilty of the death of hundreds of thousands of Poles. Truth in history cannot be contested." He announced that the Russian ambassador would be called to the foreign ministry. This past Thursday, Belarus announced that Wagner mercenaries had begun training Belarusian special forces at a military range located within striking distance of the Polish border. Russia's tactical nukes on display. Tactical nuclear weapons have been stationed in Belarus by Russia in recent weeks. Putin, who maintains regular contact with Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, is set to meet with him in Russia on Sunday, according to the Kremlin. Boris Pistorius, Germany's Minister of Defense, said on Friday that his country would back Poland in protecting NATO's eastern flank. Putin claimed that the press had reported on plans for a Polish and Lithuanian unit to conduct operations in western Ukraine, including in areas that had previously belonged to Poland. "It is well known that they, too, dream of the Belarusian lands," he said, also without providing any evidence. Wagner leader Yevgeniy Prigozhin was shown in a video released on Wednesday greeting his fighters upon their arrival in Belarus, telling them they would take no further part in the war in Ukraine but ordering them to gather strength for Wagner's operations in Africa while training the Belarusian army. According to Prigozhin, Russia's most potent fighting force is Wagner, which he led in conquering the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. However, 4 weeks ago he staged an armed mutiny after frequent disagreements with Moscow's defense establishment. Wagner fighters, many of whom were recruited from prison, were allowed to relocate to Belarus as part of the settlement that ended the insurrection.